All right, so Dr. Sarah Bald, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm so sorry that we had such interesting technology. So I just want to do a quick little introduction to Dr. Sarah Bald. She is the founder and clinical psychologist of Nest Psychological. Dr. Bald obtained her doctoral and master's degrees in clinical psychology at the Arizona School of Professional Psychology. She completed her pre-doctoral internship with the Avondale Elementary School District in order to fully understand and appreciate the learning environments of her clients. Her post-doctoral fellowship in pediatric neuropsychology was under Dr. Paul Beljan at Beljan Psychological Services, where she continued to practice after licensure. Dr. Bald's clinical experience includes pediatric neuropsychology, child and family psychology, and parenting. She also assists families in navigating the special education process through education and advocacy. Dr. Bald has presented her research at the annual scientific conferences of the American Neurological Association and the Gerontological Society of America. Her research interests include lifespan development, twice exceptionalism, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And today, Dr. Bald is going to talk to us. Her presentation is called "My Child is Struggling. What do I do? Self-care, healing, and when it might be something more." And she's going to talk about childhood concerns, adverse childhood experiences, the effects of COVID on our kids, strategies for a home, and when therapy might be appropriate. Did I miss anything?
That's about it. I wanted to see how many big words I could cram in there for you. Tongue twister words.
Yes. Well, hopefully you got everything, and I am going to let you have it from here.
Awesome. All right, let me pull my presentation up. Now get started. All right, hopefully I will not continue your technology struggles, but I might. I'm already failing. There we go. All right, so my child is struggling. What do I do? Let's talk about what is next. So I was always taught in grad school and in my professional career that you should have learning objectives. I hate learning objectives. But important points, things I want to talk about today. I want to help people understand adverse childhood experiences, ACE. You'll hear ACEs a lot when you go to any psychological presentation, any medical presentation, you'll hear the acronym ACE. And I think professionals tend to forget that we talk a lot of jargon, we talk a lot of acronyms, and we think everybody understands them, but the reality is not a whole lot of people do. So I want to help you understand what ACE is, because you'll hear that a lot, how it influences our children and how it influences adults. I want to talk about the different mental health challenges in childhood. What are we looking at? What are we concerned about? Obviously, with COVID-19 and everything going on in our world, we have to talk about it to some degree. So I'll touch briefly on COVID-19 considerations for our kids right now and their mental health. I also want to talk about the importance of self-care. Parental self-care is probably the most important thing I'm going to hit on today. But I'll talk about self-care for children and strategies at home as well. My whole goal is to scare you all at first, give you all the bad news, and then switch into the good news and what you can do at home. There's lots of things that can be done at home before therapy is considered, because right now the reality of the mental health field is that therapists, especially child therapists, are booked to the max right now. They're at max capacity. I myself, I primarily do pediatric neuropsychological evaluations, and then I'll have a few therapy clients at a time because I enjoy it. I mean, most of my job is telling people what's wrong. I enjoy the other half as well and how to help. But even right now, I'm taking on 20 to 25 therapy clients at a time just to meet the demands, because we're in a crisis right now. And for our kids, it's becoming very quickly a mental health crisis. So I want to give as many strategies, as many tips for at home thing you can do before consulting with a mental health professional, but also talk about when it's time of like, nope, we need to call in reinforcements. It's now time to speak to a professional. So that is my goal for today. And so hopefully you all leave with those in mind. So let's first talk about those adverse childhood experiences. Now I've listed a couple here as examples. We've got death, we have illness, we have instability, loss of daily routines. Those are just the iceberg. Those are the big ones. Those are the most recognized. But adverse childhood experience is exactly what it sounds like. Any part of the childhood experience that isn't settling, any part that is uncomfortable for children, for families, any combination. It's estimated that 1 in 6 people experience over 4 ACEs within their childhood. So they'll have, over 4. So they'll have 4 deaths, 4 illnesses, 4 instabilities, or any combination. They might have a dog die and a grandparent die, and mom and dad get divorced, and the daily routine goes out the window. Could be any number of things. It could be bullying, for example. Bullying is an adverse childhood experiences. So 1 in 6 people experience over 4 of those within their lifetime, within their childhood. It's a big deal. Now the CDC has come out and said preventing childhood ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, can prevent 44% of adult depression. That is a huge number. The more we can limit these adverse experiences, the better our adults are in our future generations. What's really key is prevention over intervention. Now, obviously, you can't prevent everything. If we could prevent death, we'd have to talk about other things. But there are other areas that we can prevent an adverse childhood experience. I think of things like the loss of daily routines. You know, it's been harder with COVID because we were all thrown off, but did we reestablish daily routines or did we lose those? Over summer vacation, this is a huge one. Are we continuing daily routines or are we giving them up and going to the wayside? You know, when things come up in life, because life happens, we can't prevent everything. How are we maintaining stability? How are we maintaining homeostasis within our home, within our family, as much as feasible? Prevention is key. Not everything is preventable, but some things can be prevented. So the more we can prevent this in early childhood, the better our child's adult lives look. Now, are kids resilient? Absolutely. There's a concept called plasticity. It's plastic. It sounds like, oh, the brain is plastic, it doesn't change. It's the opposite of what it sounds like. The brain is plastic, so it does change. Our kids are resilient. They can face adverse experiences and still go on to be great people. It's how we handle those adverse experiences. And that's what we're going to be talking about more today, is how are you as a family approaching something adverse that has come up and handling it? Are you able to prevent some of it? Possibly. But how are you reacting to the situation? How are you talking to your kids about the situation? And how are you as a family adjusting? Because kids they're not a bubble. Kids are a product of nature and nurture. What they were born with, as well as what their environment is. We have microsystems and we have macrosystems. You know, a child's microsystem might be the people in the home. It might be friends, it might be grandparents, more of that extended family, and then they have macrosystems, society, school, and it, you know, each has a different effect on a child. So how is each system evolving to what has occurred in life? So that's ACEs in a nutshell, and I hope that provides some clarity when you hear that. What is an adverse childhood experience? Now, different common concerns we face with our children. These are the big ones in my eyes. There's lots of. I was I was joking, I was pulling up some really boring facts to give you guys, and I pulled up my DSM. Here's all the things that can be wrong with us. But I want to focus on the main ones we see in childhood and the big ones that are going to be most common, things that we should be looking for and looking at. The very first one being anxiety. I feel like this is especially true now. Anxiety disorders are highly common. They can be a temporary reaction. They can be a more long-standing disability. Now, anxiety has several subcategories, and the CDC estimates that about 7% of children have an anxiety disorder or anxiety symptoms at some point in life. Now, obviously, we all have anxiety. We all get anxious about presentations, for example, like today. We get anxious that we're going to have technology failures, things like that. However, when it becomes a problem is when it's overwhelming. So in all of these things that I'm talking about, to some degree, they are normal. They are healthy. Kids have them. Kids need to have them. Anxiety is one of them. If we did not have anxiety, we wouldn't get anything done. If we weren't anxious about our job would never get done. We'd be like, we can do that tomorrow, whatever. It's when we get too much anxiety to where it's a problem, to where we're getting tripped up, we're over our words, we're spending hours upon hours upon hours working on a project that really doesn't mean much for our kids. This is inability to speak to family members, inability to move through the anxiety and to focus on something else. So the different anxiety disorders that are most common, I would say, in childhood, generalized anxiety disorder. This is, I am anxious in most settings. So in more than one setting, more than one reaction to something, I have an anxious response. The prevalence rate for this is about 0.9% of adolescents, and it's hard to measure in childhood because kids are moving targets. But in our adolescence, we're talking 0.9% of the population has a generalized anxiety disorder. So we can have anxiety without having the disability. There's also separation anxiety. These are your kids where you drop them off at school and they're having a hard time. They're in tears, they're meltdown mode, tantrums because they can't let go. There's selective mutism. This one's kind of obvious. These are your kids who only speak in the home, only speak to trusted individuals. These are kids who will speak to mom and dad, but might not speak to grandparents or cousins who they only see once a month, for example. There's specific phobias, social anxiety being one of those. So it's its own separate category, social anxiety disorder, but social phobia is one of them. There's phobias to eating, there's whatever it might be. We've heard of phobias before. Social anxiety disorder that I talked about, panic disorder. So these are kids who have full-blown panic attacks. So we like to, as a society, use the word panic attack like, oh my gosh, I'm having a panic attack right now. A true panic attack is I feel like I'm having a heart attack. I can't breathe, I'm getting lightheaded, I'm getting dizzy, and I'm in full panic mode. So kids can have anxiety attacks, but a panic disorder is really, I cannot function, and I feel like I'm about to die because of the level of anxiety I'm having. And then obsessive compulsive disorder is another, it's its own category of mental health analysis, but it has some roots in anxiety as well. Now, depression is a little bit more measurable in childhood, and it's estimated about 3.5% of children between the ages of 5 and 17 deal with depression. And this can be a genetic issue, it can be a reactionary issue. The big ones in childhood, the first is disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. These are your kids who are flying off the handle, who have really big reactions, what's the word I want to use? Reactions that are not appropriate in magnitude to what the experience is. So, I have a minor slight, these are your kids who are flying off the handle, where it's the end of the world. They make mountains out of molehills. I think that like binoculars, you're looking through the binoculars, I have this very small thing, I'm making it very big. There's also major depressive disorders, In kids too, depression can look like anger. So a lot of kids who are depressed present as very angry children because they're dealing with depression. And in major depression, that's usually what we're seeing is big reactions, big angry outbursts towards others, mixed with some of the executive function dysfunctions that were just spoken of. Difficulty getting out of bed, difficulty brushing the teeth, difficulty following through, no motivation. All of those are common depression signs as well. And then there's just dysthymia. What is it? Pervasive depressive disorder is what it is now. It's dysthymia. This is more of a low-grade depression. Your major depression is I am low, very low all the time. Your dysthymia is I can still function, but my mood generally overall is this very low level sadness. I never reach neutral. I never reach happy. I'm just kind of sad all the time. That's dysthymia. Your adjustment disorders fall under the big category of a post-traumatic stress disorder. So adjustment disorders really are reactions to changes in life. So your trauma disorders are time sensitive. Adjustment disorder is the shortest period of time. We're talking a few months, something happened, we're having a reaction to it. It could be with depression, it could be with anxiety, it could be with conduct problems, it could be with any combination of those. Where something happened, child is reacting to it, but then child's able to go back to normal after a short period. After a short period, after it has ended. So some major event happens in life, major event stops, child recovers within 6 months, for example. That is your adjustment disorder. It's a little bit trickier when the stressor continues. So then we're dealing with a continuous stressor, we're still adjusting to it. We then get into acute stress disorder, which is a little bit longer until the child's able to recover, and then a post-traumatic stress disorder where the child is unable to recover. So different degrees, but those are your adjustment disorders. ADHD and learning disabilities, that is predominantly what I see in my practice just because of who I am and what I do, especially with the neuropsychological testing. That's mostly what I assess for. ADHD, frontal lobe mediated process. It's how well do you sustain attention, inhibit impulsive responding, how hyperactive are you, things to that nature. It used to be ADD and ADHD. When they rebranded and did the new diagnostic manual, they combined it. So now it's AD in parentheses HD. So it's predominantly inattentive type, predominantly hyperactive type, predominantly combined type ADHD. About 5% of children have ADHD, according to our last update of the manual, which is when I was in grad school, so it's been a while. But then 2.5% of adults meet criteria for ADHD. So ADHD is housed in the front part of our brain. The front part of our brain continues to grow until we're about 30. So many people either grow out of it or grow into it, or their brain catches up with the rest of them. But this is difficulties with sustained attention and very inconsistent too. What I see a lot in my practice is parents will come to me and they'll say like, Timmy for sure doesn't have ADHD. I mean, you put a video game in front of him and he can sit there for 8 hours. Kid with ADHD couldn't do that? Absolutely not. The difficulty with ADHD is these kids have difficulty prioritizing their attention. So where they might be able to pay attention to something they love, it's not really them paying attention. It's rewarding, so it's activating the reward center of their brain. Think about other things that activate the reward center of our brain, addictions for one. So they're not purposefully paying attention. The video game, the stimulus, whatever they're doing is continually drawing their attention in. But then I go back to it, parents, Timmy's, not ADHD, he can pay attention, he's just lazy, he's just hard-headed. And I hear that a lot from my ADHD kids. Lazy, hard-headed, stubborn. The difficulty with the disability is that they don't realize they're making the mistake in the moment that they're making it because they can't pay attention to it. So it becomes this double-edged sword of, I don't know I'm making this mistake, all I see is sometimes is the negative reaction to the outcome of what I just did. So I just made an inattentive mistake. I just made an impulsive mistake. I didn't realize I did it in the moment. I didn't have any intention. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be a bad kid. But now teachers are mad at me. Now mom's yelling at me that I didn't do it. I did what she said, what she said to do. What do you mean? Because they don't see. So then with ADHD, you get a lot of comorbid disabilities, and any of these can be comorbid, but with ADHD, I get kids who are highly anxious because they don't feel like they can control themselves. Or I get kids who are depressed because I am trying my hardest, but I'm not getting the reaction I expect because I'm not able to. So that's the big thing with ADHD, and that's where I get on my soapbox every so often, because these kids really, they're facing an uphill battle, but nobody recognizes it because they have moments of clarity where they're not it. I mean, people expect, and we as parents feel pride of this, of it can't be a disability because they can do this every now and then. But that's not true with ADHD. With ADHD, sometimes they can pay attention. Sometimes they can't. It's just catching, was this an ADHD moment or was this a kid moment and you were being a little stubborn, which is also sometimes possible. The other one I see in my office, big time, is learning disabilities. Reading, writing, math are the big ones. There's auditory processing disorder, other learning disabilities like that, but the big ones, reading, writing, and math, occur in about 5 to 15% of children. Now, learning disabilities in reading, there's 3 or 4, depending on which professional you ask, or more. Some come up with more. The big ones for reading disabilities, the first being phonological dyslexia. This is the inability to recognize part sounds of words and string them together to form a real word. Orthographic, which is, I've seen the word the 500 times in the last 2 days, but I still have to sound out the word the. I don't have that recognition. And then there's combined type ADHD. I don't recognize the words I've seen before, or combined type reading disability, I'm sorry. I don't recognize words I've seen before, nor can I sound out words that I've seen before. Another one that's talked about often is surface dyslexia. So this is, I can read, but I don't understand what I've read, essentially. It's a comprehension problem. I attribute a lot of that to ADHD, or to kids who are really good at reading, so they read so fast they don't have to try, so they don't pay attention to what they read in the moment. But some professionals talk about surface dyslexia, and some people treat surface dyslexia. Under both of those two are underlying executive function difficulties. So ADHD and learning disabilities can have comorbid executive function difficulties. Executive function is just a broad umbrella term. It means a lot of different things the brain does, and a lot of the executive functions work together in unison to produce skills and behaviors. There's things like working memory. It's your ability to hold information online, problem solve with it. There's inhibition, which is impulse control, sustained attention, obviously. There's something called cognitive shift. It's the ability to take information from the environment and change your problem solving approach. How flexible is your problem solving approach? There's planning and organization, not necessarily like the desk we saw earlier, but more planning and organization for problem solving of, do you do step 1, step 2, step 3 when you're trying to solve a problem, or do you jump around step 1, step 3, step 2, and all over the board. There's encoding, which is short-term memory, long-term memory. There's one called focus execute or perception action coupling, depending on the professional you talk to. The ability to master skills based on repetition, and then blend new material into a mastered skill set for new learning. So for example, learning your addition facts, not having to add 8 plus 7, you just know what it is. And then learning grouping to learn multiplication, where now I can do 8 times 7 without thinking about it. Learning to ride a tricycle, taking the training wheels off, learning to ride a bicycle. With just a little bit of repetition, I can do this new skill. I can incorporate new information into an already mastered skill set for new learning. Also in adulthood, going from dating to marriage. I can take the skills of dating, add the concept of marriage, and now we are combined under contract. Can I reproduce those skills? So those are some of the executive functions. It's not an extensive list, but some of the major ones that we see in children. Autism spectrum and developmental delays really only occurs in about 1% of the population. It's a hot topic right now, but it occurs in about 1% of the population. And then oppositional defiant and conduct disorder. Now, when they redid our diagnostic manual, I have some bones to pick. You get a little bit of my own personal bias within this, but they made it so children who meet criteria for any number of disabilities can be diagnosed with all of those disabilities, which for insurance purposes works great. Now I'm treating a kid with 5 different disabilities, insurance is more likely to reimburse me for it. The problem with ODD and conduct disorder is that these kids are very rare. They typically grow up in a home where they have to be defensive, they have to do certain behaviors to survive. They're very bristly, they're very hard to connect with. They have no interest in connecting with you. Things like ADHD, things like executive function deficits, things like autism spectrum, all mimic ODD. And so a lot of children will come in and they'll be diagnosed with both. I've got ADHD and ODD, I've got autism and ODD. And to some degree it does, it explains their symptoms perfectly. But is there malintent behind the opposition to the parents? Is there malintent? Do I want to harm you? Do I want to cause physical or emotional pain to you? Or am I a product of my disability? And that's where it's a good tease out, and something I always have parents remember of, ODD these kids, if it's not treated, end up with antisocial personality disorder. So it's always something to consider. Is this a true ODD, or is this a product of an uphill battle that I'm facing as a child? So those are my common childhood concerns, things to look out for. Now let's talk about COVID-19's impact on childhood mental health. The jury's still out. We have no idea at this point in time how COVID has really impacted our kids. I can give you my own personal experience based on my own practice. I'm seeing a lot more kids now. I'm referring to other professionals who are also booked. Everyone has wait lists that are out the door August, September, October, as early as to get in. I have a lot more kids in crisis mode than I've ever had before. But we won't know how it really affected our kids until a few years later. I've got a lot more research to do. But if we think about ACEs, we think about those adverse childhood experiences, which ones impact it? Off that list, we've got illness, we've got death, we've got a loss of daily routines, and instability within the household. Bingo, we hit all 4 ACEs in 1 year. So there's your 4 that 1 in 6 have experienced. I'd argue that every child has experienced 4, likely, in this last year. But when we think about 2 of the life stages, we've got different life stages that affect kids. In the preschool years, 3 to 5-year-olds, their life stage is initiative versus guilt. So this is where kids are gaining their purpose in life. Where do I find the initiative? The way they figured that out is through exploration of their environment. They're going to explore their environment. When they fail this stage, they end up with this overwhelming sense of guilt. Now we know these people. We've all met these people. The ones who apologize for everything, even though it's not their fault. Sorry. Don't say sorry. Sorry. Oops. Sorry. But those are your kids who had difficulty with the exploration from 3 to 5 years old. When they're in school, 6 to 11, it's called industry versus inferiority. So this is when kids start to feel competent. Hey, I'm really good at this. Hey, this is something I succeed in. And they need school for that. They truly need school for that. Now, not all things are good in school. Not all kids are good in school. You know, when I think about kids with ADHD, with learning disorders, it might not be school that does it for them, but for some kids, school is what does it for them. It helps them explore. If it's not academic, it's art, it's PE, it's recess, it's social interactions, whatever it might be. But school is a priority for that. So we stripped away school for the last year and a half. What type of impact is that going to have on our kids? Kids who fail this stage can feel inadequate. You know, kids really rely, it's not just the 6 to 16-year-olds, but they really rely on feedback from others and approval from others about their performance, about how they're doing. And we as parents can tell them as much as we want, but a lot of kids, it means so much more coming from teacher or from parents, for example. The last stage for kids, adolescence years, identity versus role confusion. This is when kids learn fidelity. They learn to be good to each other. They seek out who they are and what their role is going to be as an adult. Who are they going to turn into? What do they want to become? We all went to college and half of us changed our majors, so it's not set in stone, but what type of person do I want to become? And social relationships are key to this. I'm going to test out other people. I'm going to test out friend groups. I'm going to test out, you know, the burnouts and the goody-goodies and the cheerleaders and the jocks. And I'm going to try out all these friend groups. I'm going to see what I fit into. Again, we've taken away these social relationships for the last year and a half. What kind of impact is that going to have on our kids? We have no idea. Was it necessary? Absolutely. But what kind of impact are we looking at in the future? That's really important to consider as a parent. All right, enough about the bad news. Tired of the bad news. Let's talk good news. So things you can do at home, things that you can do to help you and your kids survive. My favorite line ever, and I tell this to every parent who comes across my room. You have to put your oxygen mask on in a plane before you assist others. Parenting is the exact same way. You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of your kids. If you aren't healthy, if you aren't feeling competent, how are you expected to help other people, let alone people that you're supposed to raise into functioning adults? I mean, you've got to be on your A game constantly as a parent, which is asking a lot. I recognize parenting kids is hard. It's really hard. And when there's a disability involved, when there's a deficit involved, when there's a mental health disorder involved, it is especially difficult. Parents of kids with mental health concerns are at a greater risk themselves of anxiety, depression, and other mental health concerns. That's just the reality of it. So checking in with yourself, doing good for yourself is the most important thing you can do as a parent. We want to give everything up for our kids. Like, our kids are everything. But you got to do some things for you so that you can give them everything. I use a cup example. So I have two examples for this. The first is the oxygen mask. The second is the cup. We as parents, we have a cup. I wish I had a cup of water, mostly because I'm thirsty. We have a cup. We constantly are pouring our cup into our kids' cup. What happens when your cup runs dry? You are unable to give any more to your kids. So you have to do things that help fill your cup up so that you can keep filling your kids' cup up. This means lots of things. This means regular check-ins with trusted individuals, check-ins with spouses, check-ins with friends, check-ins with mental health providers, whoever you trust, that you can say, life is hard. Life is not easy. There's a great book for parents that I love. It's for everybody. It's not just for parents. But I give it for parents. It's Brené Brown. I thought it was just me, but it wasn't. and it talks about how we all go through hard times, but none of us talk about it. So we bottle it up because what you see on Facebook is not real. I mean, we see all of our mom friends on Facebook with their beautiful families and their beautiful pictures, but we miss the story behind the beautiful pictures. You know, my sister sent me a photo, probably start of the pandemic. They were still taking part in the photos. And she said, here's the pretty one going on our wall. Great shot of her and the kids and her husband. Here's the silly one for the environment where they're all wearing masks. She's like, and here's what was going on most of the time. Baby's crying his head off, one kid's punching another kid. And nobody sees those pictures. What they see is the pretty pictures on the wall, the pretty pictures on Facebook, because that's what we put out there. But who do you trust to say, I am struggling? Who's been there? Who can empathize with you? Who can say, yeah, this sucks. This is hard. Let's get through it together. Let's bounce ideas off of each other. Let's survive this together. Another good strategy, and you're going to hate me for this, is mindful parenting. Mindful parenting is incredibly inefficient parenting. It is slow, it is exhausting, it is grueling, but it is a great way to prevent burnout. This means slowing things down. We have an agenda, we have a schedule, we have to get out the door. Slowing down, stepping back, and evaluating our own feelings and reactions to the situation. I'll throw myself under the bus. I was raised in a military family. To be early is to be on time is to be late is to be dead. I'm married to an individual who is late to everything he does. So I am rushing, trying to get out of the house on time. We're leaving the house 5 minutes before we have to be somewhere. And I am pissed off the entire car ride to wherever we're going. But slowing down, evaluating my feelings, evaluating my priorities versus my partner's priorities. Where am I at and why am I reacting this way? The same goes for parenting. I've got a 3-year-old, I want to do X, Y, and Z, slowing down. Is the 3-year-old able to even do this? Are they able to do what I'm asking? So taking a big step back in those moments where we're feeling frustrated, we're feeling at wit's end, and evaluating our own feelings and our own reactions, figuring out where that's coming from. Also adjusting our expectations. There's a thing called a goodness of fit model. So this is, instead of me trying to make kid fit into my box, I am creating a box around child that they fit in. So I have a child who can do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to boost them up in those moments. I'm going to use those strengths to their weaker moments. Instead of making them fit my expectations, I'm going to change my expectations to fit where they are at, what they are capable, what their little brain is capable in this moment. Also understanding the child's motivation issues. A lot of times this is difficult. A lot of kids don't seem to be motivated by anything. There's always something. It might be something extrinsic. They're motivated by cash. They're motivated by time on the computer, time on the iPad, time on the TV. There's an extrinsic reward that they will do. Some of it, for lucky parents, it's intrinsic rewards. They like feeling good about themselves. They're going to do things that please their parents because that's what they like. Those are the lucky parents. It might be something social. They're motivated by the social aspect of anything. They don't want to play soccer, but if it means they get to make friends playing soccer, they're going to play soccer. There's attention, good or bad. This is the trap a lot of people fall into. Kids are getting attention no matter what. If you're yelling at them, they're getting attention. If you are praising them, they're getting attention. So if they're motivated by attention and they figured out how to make you snap real fast and pay attention to them, they're going to make you snap real fast and get that attention that they want. So if you have a child who's motivated by attention, making sure it's positive attention and ignoring behaviors you don't like is really key. There's kids who are motivated by control. Usually my gifted kids, but other kids are too. They feel like they have to control the situation. Choices are a great one for control. You can do this or this. I don't care which outcome it is, but I like both of them, but you get to choose. There's also 3 other ones: sensory, pain, and escape. They're motivated by escaping the situation. They're motivated by creating pain or avoiding pain, or they're motivated by sensory needs. Those are your sensory seeking kids who just need constant sensory input. There's also functions of behavior. It's good to know with motivation styles. So that's what motivates kids, but what is the function of their behavior? Like I said, gaining attention is one of them, escaping situations. Those two tend to go hand in hand. Another thing you can do for yourself as a parent is listing your child's strengths. What is my kid good at? What can they do? Let me list all that for myself and give them as many opportunities as possible. But also remember that when they do something that's part of their strengths, I don't have to be as hands-on as a parent. So I can take a step back in those strong moments instead of helicoptering at that moment in time. And then engaging in your own self-care. What fills you up as a person? What completes you? A lot of my clients hate me because I ask them, what are your priorities? What are your motivation life? What makes you tick? And a lot of people aren't sure. What matches your value system? What do you value in life? And how do you incorporate more of your values into your everyday routine? That's incredibly important. For some people, self-care might be getting outside. It might be going for a hike. It might be exercising. Others, it might be trying a new restaurant or a date night with a spouse. It might be alone time. I mean, just having 10 minutes to yourself in the quiet might be just enough for that self-care so that you get filled up. You might be reading a book, but what is your self-care? What fills you up? What matches your value system? What do you prioritize in life? And spend time every day engaging in that. It's incredibly important. So once you've taken care of yourself, then you can start to take care of your kids. So the biggest thing you can do for your kids in the home is having open lines of communication. So relationships with our kids change across the years. It's really easy to stay connected with your kids to some degree, not always, but it's more and more difficult as they get older into the teenage years until they're young adults or until they have kids of their own. Communication starts to break down. It's hard to connect with them, and teens aren't very gracious, and they're often rejecting of parental influence. It goes back to that life stage. I'm trying to figure out me, so me and my social relationships, and you know nothing. I joke with most parents, they know nothing. They actually know a lot, but according to their kids, they don't know a lot. So some ideas, some tips for having open lines of communication within the household. The first is listen. Listening is super difficult. As parents, we want to jump in, we want to fix, we want to make things better. We've been there, done that. We know the solution. Just listen to me and I'll give you the solution. But that's not what listening is. I put a link here for a video. I don't think we're gonna have time for it today, but it's very hilarious. It's called It's Not About the Nail. I strongly recommend looking up the video. It's Not About the Nail on YouTube. It talks all about listening versus fixing. So we're very quick to offer as parents solutions without fully listening. Direct questions are a big no-no for teenagers. They hate direct questions. I more like in listening, just reflecting back. So I see you look really sad right now, or I see you're really excited about something, or I wonder what's going through your mind. Very open-ended statements instead of questions are an easier way to get in there. And then remember, when they're sharing with you, they might not want you to fix it. They might just want to have someone to listen to them. So be in that ear instead of trying to immediately jump in and save the day, which is hard. And number 2 is validating their feelings. That must be really tough. That must be heartbreaking. You must be really sad about that, or I can appreciate how sad you are about that. And you have every right to feel whatever you're feeling. Show them that they can trust you. Don't be a dictator. You know, you set the rules, you are the boss. I think several parents fall into the slip of, well, I don't want to be like my parents, so I'm going to be cool. And so then you're more friends than you are a parent. You are still a parent. You still set the rules. You still set boundaries. And kids need that. Kids need rules. Kids need balance, boundaries. They need structure. But don't be afraid to explain your consequence and to give them a say, that let them say that they're not happy about it. I appreciate that you are not happy about this right now, but this is the rule, and this is the rule that we set as a family. You know, even setting your own family rules at home is good practice. Setting it together as a family and reminding people of what the rules are. Now, when kids are really little, don't explain things to them. Some kids, especially the bright ones, you know, we might have a 5-year-old who can have a very adult conversation with us, but mid-meltdown, don't explain yourself. There's a consequence and you are going to your room, and that's that. Number 5 is give praise. We give little kids a lot of praise. We are always excited about what our little kids do, but teens need it just as much as kids, and I think we forget that. Teens need to hear that they've done something right. Now, I hate phrases like good job. Oh, good job. That's awesome. Great job with the straight A's. Focusing on the outcome is not as effective as focusing on effort that kids put in. So you worked really hard for that. You should be proud of yourself. Or I'm very proud of you. Things like that. Instead of just a blanket good job, and be as specific as you can in your praise. I really like how you handled that situation. Or you sounded very mature when you put it that way. Things like that. Controlling your own emotions, which is hard. We tend to escalate each other as human beings. So I might be around someone who's anxious, especially in grad school, and then I get more anxious, and then they get more anxious because I'm anxious, and then it turns into a spiral, more of a downward spiral than an upward spiral. Same thing. Kids hot-headed, you get hot-headed, they're just going to get more hot-headed, and it's going to spiral out of control. Doing things together, whether it be cooking meals, you know, and the next one is sharing regular meals, doing things as a family. Doesn't have to be all the time. I laughed, we were out at Lake Powell the other day, and there was a boat that was called Mandatory Family Joy. Joy is not mandatory. Don't make it mandatory. Don't make things you do together mandatory. Don't make it all the time. But doing really small things together. It doesn't have to be we're all going on a family vacation, we're going on a 10-day road trip, and we're stuck in a car together for 10 days. Small things. Cooking together, sharing a meal, sitting there while they're doing homework, sitting reading a book yourself, things like that, doing things together. Sharing regular meals. I have a lot of teens actually who tell me in session that they want this, but the family doesn't sit down together anymore and they miss that. So I think teens have a lot more that they want from families and they're willing to share. They tend to push families away, but they truly do want some of these things like sharing regular meals together. And be observant. Being observant is your biggest indicator is there something else going on? You know, have things changed? Do they look different? Have they lost pleasure in activities? Have they lost motivation? Are they not finding joy in things like they used to? Have their interests changed? Are they much happier than they used to be? Has something good happened in their life? You know, just being observant and commenting on what you see and leaving it at that. Just making small comments, maybe check in with them. You look really happy, is that true? You look really excited about that, do I have that right? You look really sad, let me know if you need to talk, if you need someone to listen. Things like that, just being observant, taking time, just sit and watch, not in the creepy sort of way, but sit and watch your kids and really look at what's changed. Because life moves fast, and we get caught up in how fast life moves. So just always being observant is key. Now, self-care for kids. Parents' ideas of self-care looks very different than a child's view of self-care. So what might be fun for you is not going to be what's fun for your kids. So it's important to really observe and be mindful of your child's responses to suggested activities. So you might suggest something. How do they respond to it? Do they look truly excited, or are they trying to be nice? Are they trying to be mean, but they're actually a little bit excited about it? You know, be mindful of their responses to what you suggest. I say don't use tech time as a measure of self-care. I read an interesting article recently that said it's not actually technology and social media that causes depression. Depression leads to increased social media use. So by allowing teens to be on social media as their self-care time, are we just continuing the cycle of depression? Because now they're not getting out, they're not getting moving, they're not getting out. It's also a good reward and a good motivator for some kids. So if that's their self-care time, I would not use it as a motivator. So let's create a different self-care time. Tech is not good for self-care. And it's good to develop a self-care routine with the family and making it a priority within the household of either a schedule. This is our scheduled self-care time. This is what we do as a family. Or having conversations frequently and making it part of the language and the narrative of the household of what is our self-care routine? How do we take care of ourselves? How do we put ourselves in the right mindset? How do we fill ourselves back up as humans? And when it comes to self-care for kids, making it child-centered. That's why I chose kind of the graphic that I chose, was putting kids at the center of their own self-care. Not forcing them to do something, not imposing our own beliefs about what self-care is, but putting them at the center of their self-care, because you're going to be at the center of your self-care because you as the parent are doing self-care. I'm telling you, that is my number one thing, is you got to fill up your own cup. But some suggested self-care for kids. The first is community work. Kids like to feel connected. Kids like to feel like they're helping others. Kids are generally, especially the younger ones, helpful human beings. You tell them you need help with something, they're like, yeah, what I got. That's not every kid, but a lot of kids are. So how do you get them connected into the community? How do you get them to do community work? And again, remember, this is a self-care activity, so this is good for every kid, but do they enjoy doing it? Is if it's self-care versus this is good for you, so we're gonna make you do it. But things like getting them involved, especially the teens and big brothers, big sisters. Big brothers, big sisters always needs big brothers, so getting your teen involved or your young adult involved. Getting them started early so that they develop that sense of pride in the organization. Things like the food bank, any community service activity, any community project, even going into the animal shelters and reading to the dogs that are scared of humans. Things like that, anything that can get them connected into the community, make them feel like they are helping others that they're around, and then having conversations. You looked really happy while you were doing that. You looked like that meant a lot to you. Mindfulness. There are several mindfulness activities I like. My very, very, very favorite is a mindfulness activity called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, it's good for self-care. It's good to do all the time, but it's also good for when a child is highly anxious, when they're dealing with depression, things like that. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is your 5 senses. What I do first, and I have people apologize to me all the time because they mix up the senses. It's okay if you don't do it in this order. But the way I teach it is point out 5 things first that you can see in your environment, and very specific things too. So I see the individual triangles on my clock, for example. So just like, I see a clock, I see a printer, I see, cleaning wipes, whatever I mean. Pointing out smaller details. So I see 5 things in my environment. Next, 4 things I can hear in my environment. Now this is kind of to trick kids a little bit, but it's also good and to trick adults because I do this constantly as well. It's mindful listening. It gets you to slow down and take a breath. It's hard to hear 4 things in the environment. So like, for example, right now in my office, my AC is insanely loud. So I can hear my AC right now and I can hear my computer going, but 4 things I can hear around me. 3 things I can touch. I can touch my sweater, it feels like this. I can touch my desk, it feels like this. I can touch my computer, it feels like this. I'm having them describe the feeling. 2 things I can smell, and then 1 thing I can taste. And sometimes this means treating yourself to a cookie or having a glass of water, something like that, something at the very end. So I always save taste for last because A, that's the hardest, and B, you get a little treat for finishing it. There's other mindfulness activities. There's things like deep breathing and progressive muscle relaxation, meditation, yoga, all of those are good mindfulness activities. Talking about your own feelings can be good. Now this is a trap. It's totally a trap, especially with teenagers. So as adults, we relate to each other by talking about our feelings. Oh, I'm feeling highly anxious today. Let me reach out to someone I know who's been there and let's like have a pity party together. Kids want to hear you talk about your feelings when it's not related to them. But in that moment, they don't really want you to talk about their feelings, especially teenagers. Little kids do to some degree, teens don't. So they're dealing with something, you've been there, you've done that, you want to fix it, holding back, not making it about you. Because that's the feedback I get from a lot of my teen clients is they just make it about them and blah, blah, blah. And me as the adults in the room, I'm like, no, that's how adults relate to each other. Like that, she's just trying to connect with you. But the teens experience is very minimized because, you know, mom's just making this about her, dad's just making this about him, and they're totally ignoring how I'm feeling. So in other activities, talking about your feelings. So if you do a self-care routine with the family, and it might start with, let's talk about our day. Here's my day, here's how I felt throughout the day, here's what I'm looking forward to, for example. But making that regular to talk about feelings so that kids recognize, oh, I can talk about my feelings with others because mom and dad do it on a daily basis. Teaching kids how to acknowledge their feelings. When you see them with a really big emotion, helping them label that emotion is incredibly important, and using emotion words and feeling words whenever you can. So bringing feelings into the narrative, into the language in the household makes it more regular so that they're more likely to talk to you and be able to describe that feeling in the future. Some kids really like journaling. There's really great ones you can buy on Amazon that are just straight journals, or there's creative journals or coloring journals or CBT journals. I mean, there's all sorts of journaling you can do, and it's not just what you think of as writing in a diary. Could be, but it's not always that way. And dedicating alone time. Letting them have some time alone. Not watch TV during alone time. Kids still need to be bored every so often. But giving them time that's just them. Just them to explore their feelings, explore their desires, explore what makes them them. And then some kids do well with a sensory corner as well. I meant to bring it in. I'm not anymore. I was covering glitter because my last session we made a sensory bottle. But having a soft, squishy place for them to lay in, or a beanbag chair that kind of cocoons them, or a swing from the ceiling, or whatever it might be. Some kids do well with sensory. The kids, especially who need sensory input, if you can create some sort of sensory calming area for them that's full of squishmallows or full of, you know, different textured things, whatever they're drawn to, that can be beneficial as well. So there are some self-care activities for kids. That list is not extensive at all. There's lots of other things. It really is what makes the child happy, what fills them up. It could be a sport, it could be hiking, it could be getting out in nature, it could be camping as a family, it could be building Legos, it could be any number of things. But here are some ideas for self-care for kids that are a little bit more out of the box than, oh, this is what they enjoy doing. Other strategies at home, engaging with them, especially the little ones, in child-centered play at least once a week. You know, Timmy, you get to decide what we're doing today, and I'm following you around the house. There's a Netflix movie about that. I don't remember the title of it, where I think they couldn't say no for the day. I don't recommend that. But, you know, we're going to devote an hour where we play whatever you play, and you dictate the play, and I'm not going to have any say in it. I'm just going to follow your lead. Having feeling times. This is really good for my anxious kids. So with my kids with anxiety, I talk about a worry box and worry bullies. So our worries are bullies. They're little ghoulish little creatures that'll climb up on our shoulders, whisper mean things in our ear that make us worry, and they overpower us. So I talk about, flicking the worry bully off your shoulder, and then taking those worry statements and only focusing on them during a designated worry time. So kids who have a lot of anxiety ask a lot of questions. They ask questions they know the answer to. They ask the same question 5 times, 10 times in a row because it's part of their coping. They're trying to cope with the worry. But the more we focus on the anxiety, the bigger the anxiety gets. There's a book that I love called What to Do If You Worry Too Much. It compares anxiety to a tomato plant. Now, a tomato plant, if you take really good care of it, you give it lots of sunlight, you give it lots of water, you play nice music for it, it grows really big. The more you pay attention to it and care for it, the bigger it gets. And it jokes about tomato ice cream because then you have too many tomatoes. Worries are the same way. The more you focus on your worries, the bigger the worry gets. So I will give kids with anxiety a designated worry time throughout the day. If it's not worry time, we're going to lock that up and save it for worry time. So I'll have them imagine like a strong box in their head. We're going to put that worry away until 3 o'clock when it's worry time. And then we're going to spend 15 minutes, 3 o'clock, going over all the worries in their head. Because what kids see is that they've got a million things throughout the day that they put in the worry box. But when they open the worry box up, there's only 2 or 3 things left in there because most of the worries resolved on their own. So that's one strategy. I like feeling time. But having a designated time each day where you let kids express themselves. If it's not anxiety, giving them 10 minutes a day to talk about what's making them sad. Give them 10 minutes a day to talk about what's making them happy, whatever it might be. Using open-ended statements, like I said earlier. You look, you appear, I wonder, things like that. Having mindfulness minutes, practicing mindfulness techniques throughout the day. Every day at 3, we have a mindful minute where we do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We do progressive muscle relaxation. I recommend looking that one up. It's a great one. Breathing exercises, whatever it might be. And then there's individual strategies for certain concerns. I talked about anxiety. With depression, it's a lot of those open-ended statements. It depends on what the issue is. There's lots of great things, and I've got some great resources for you to share with you. But I'm definitely open to chatting as well if you have questions about certain strategies. Some really good resources for you as parents. ChildMind is one of my favorites. It's an organization that prints up summary sheets, guides for everybody about each of the disabilities. Understood.org walks you through different disabilities, how they work in the school, how they look in the school. Some really great books, Parenting from the Inside Out. 1, 2, 3 Magic is a great parenting strategy. It's 3 strikes and you're out. What to Do When You Worry Too Much is the tomato book that I talked about. There's also a series of books. There's one, All Dogs Have ADHD, All Cats Have Asperger's, and All Owls Have Anxiety. So those are great ones that teach the kids different symptoms. So if they have been diagnosed with something, it teaches them what the different symptoms are with really cute pictures that go with it. Because the key with kids, it's if they have a disability, helping them understand what the disability is, and then developing insight into this is what I need to be successful, even though I've been dealt this hand in life. When to contact a professional. I know I'm running out of time, I'm watching. When to contact a professional. Many professionals do a quick consult at no charge, myself included. Psychologytoday.com is a great resource. You can look up psychologists, therapists, mental health professionals who take your insurance, who are in your area. You can filter by age, gender, specialty, insurance company, by anything you could imagine you can filter by. And most of them will put on there too if they do consults for free. If there's sudden changes in behavior and mood, good or bad, it might be time to contact a professional. There's indicators of hopelessness, so nothing ever goes my way and I'm hopeless and I have nothing to look forward anymore. Or if you as the parent are feeling lost. Kids lately, I've been noticing, have been asking for therapy. It's kind of become cool on TikTok to see a therapist, so some of that is that. But if kids are asking for it, it's a big indicator of let's contact somebody and let's see if there is someone who would be a good fit for you. And other times you might consider an evaluation first. So let's really figure out what is happening before we jump into therapy. Now I'm biased because I do assessments, but I truly believe with an assessment, you can get at the root of what's happening a lot faster. So it might take a therapist 10 or 15 sessions to get to the evaluation is able to get to in quick one and done. Well, for me, it's 4 sessions, but a one and done evaluation, that evaluator can then share with your therapist what is going on in much more detail. So some parents do start with an evaluation. It's something I recommend, but not everyone goes that route, and I appreciate why, because it's quite the commitment to do an evaluation. So that's all I had for you. I stuck to my time limit, and I'm proud of myself. I have a hard time with that.
Very, very nice. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate you coming and doing this presentation.